Co-director.
We have this whole thing about who's director this week. If I'm out of town, Nick's director or Jimmy's director.
Well, then the news got Nick as director.
Yeah, the newspaper usually puts somebody else as director. So the joke is who's director this week. And we went on one mission, and the fanciest hotel room, the suite, went to one of the other guys. So we're like, yep, you're director this week.
Hi, Luke.
Roger, hello.
Yeah, I'll sign in really quickly.
Does anyone else want coffee?
Yeah, I'll get some. Go ahead. Here.
Actually, take this one. I'll top the pot.
Oh, okay. So how you doing, Luke?
Oh, good. Sorry, I had to get rid of a garden. Took care of that side. Yeah.
So it's Cathy.
Slow, though, very slow.
Oh, God.
Just with Lyndon.
Oh,
Yeah. So he
say
arranged.
that.
It's his pen.
Oh.
we
Jimmy was swiping your pen, huh? Gotta look out for this one.
Yeah.
What's that?
You gotta look out for this one. There's a reason I hired it.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. How you doing today?
You can also come with your,
Yeah.
you can also come sit
Not
on
quite
the,
as
sit at
cold
the
as
table.
it was.
Jen, you can come sit up with us.
Yeah, we don't
You're
like
looking
to
good
throw
there.
it out.
I noticed I got a little shirt.
That's right. Coffee is coming.
Oh, good.
You need another pot.
Good morning.
Here's my pot.
Oh, good. It's a nice time of year.
Hi there.
Short. Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. We're here at the Energy for All Alaska Task Force meeting. If we could just take one brief moment of silence in remembrance of the fallen, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, today our presentation for the Energy Group are the economic opportunities and impacts of UAVs, or UASs. It always confuses me with UASs, the campus down in Juneau. But of UASs, unmanned aerial systems and aircraft systems on Alaska's economy today, and what we can expect, or what we can, an estimate of what it might be in the future, it could be. All right, so we have with us Dr. Cathy Cahill. She's the director of ACUASI up in the university, as well as James Parrish, the director of business for ACUASI. And so I'll let you actually introduce yourselves, if you would.
Okay, so I'm Cathy Cahill. I'm the director of ACUASI, the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration, RDT&E. We were named by a retired four-star general. It shows it's unpronounceable, so we go by ACUASI. So I've been here in Fairbanks 20 years now, and been a professor of chemistry up at the university. My background is air pollution, and I got suckered into unmanned aircraft because I needed where in the atmosphere the pollution transported. And they got me engaged in this fascinating field, and so I now do that full time. And with me is Jimmy Parrish, our business director, and Jimmy, I'll let you do your introduction.
Hi, Jimmy Parrish, born and raised Fairbanks. Cathy stole me from Senator Murkowski's office, so I made a great transition out of politics into the university life. So that's kind of the way I like to say it. But I'm very new into this field, but I'm learning fast. It's what we're doing up at the university right now is really great things, and you're going to see a lot of economic benefits to the state in the next 10 years because of what we're doing. So.
And Jimmy's selling himself short. He's got great connections across the state of Alaska, and he understands the state and the needs, and that's very important in positioning the unmanned aircraft field in the state.
Cathy, just part of your intro piqued my interest. Are you still using the drones for air quality?
There's been a lot of discussion about that, and we probably will be helping the borough here in the not-too-distant future.
Well, I have a suggestion, that if there's an outdoor wood boiler really smoking up the neighborhood, just fly over and drop a plug in the chimney.
FAA doesn't let us drop things from unmanned
Well,
aircraft
you
in
don't have to
national
tell
airspace. There is a reason, because among other things, they would A, become very well armed, and B, all of us would be playing with thermite grenades and other things. So it really is safer that we can't do that. But and we can discuss offline the challenges with privacy and other things about flying unmanned aircraft and various things. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the economic opportunities for using unmanned aircraft in Alaska. So first off, who are we? We are the University of Alaska Center of Excellence for Unmanned Aircraft. We actually have been doing unmanned aircraft at the university since 2001, so we're some of the granddaddies in the field. We lead one of the 7 FAA test sites. This is an important component for doing research and development and test and evaluation of aircraft. We are one of the 15 core schools in the FAA Center of Excellence. And as of May, we are now the lead of one of the 10 FAA UAS integration pilot programs. I'll talk more about that program later. That is a huge designation. So with this, University of Alaska Fairbanks has the triple crown of FAA approval. No other institution has all 3. One state has all 3, and that would be North Dakota. But they are housed in different portions here. Here in Alaska, everything comes through us, and we work with our partners to try to benefit the entire state. So who are we? We're a combination of veterans and former defense contractors. We've got scientists, engineers. We can pull all the best and brightest from the university, which is awesome. We have pilots. Every single one of our unmanned aircraft pilots is a manned aircraft pilot. This is a very, very important factor because they understand the airspace. These are not yahoos who are going to go take an unmanned aircraft, throw it in the air, and risk people in manned aircraft. We will be very, very careful because we could be the people impacted. So when we are working on rules and regulations, we are very aware of the consequences of us being in that airspace. And we have stopped operations because there was too much manned aircraft activity in areas because it was unsafe. We have airframe and power plant mechanics, so we've got people who can maintain them. These are folks who are trained as manned aviators who have made the switch to unmanned, but they understand the standards and the levels of maintenance and security that we need to maintain. We've got business developers such as Jimmy, and we've got a bunch of very good embedded contractors, including companies that have spun off from university graduates and others. So we really are trying to work with folks and develop what we're doing for the state. Okay, so just for you, Jomo, UA system, we do not mean University of Alaska, we mean Unmanned Aircraft System. And the whole purpose of this one is pointing out that it is a system. And everybody gets excited about the aircraft. The aircraft is the cool, sexy thing. The problem is the aircraft, unless it happens to have a payload, is just burning very expensive holes in the sky. And that payload is the key point. The moment you put a payload on that unmanned aircraft, now you have the ability to make money, you have the ability to do things. So a lot of our focus is on that payload component. What is it? How do we use it? People bring us questions and say, okay, I want to do X. We need to identify the payload that would potentially work with an aircraft. Once you've determined what payload you want, you have to integrate it into the aircraft. This is not always trivial. Weight and balance are important, and unmanned aircraft, things that are heavy are just bad news. So we are constantly tweaking things.
And I was going to say, and everybody that's selling us something to try and integrate it says it's plug and play. It's not plug and play.
It's never plug and play. That is the biggest myth in existence. But to give you an idea, early on in 2006, we were flying Scan Eagles. We went down to In Situ, which is the maker of the aircraft, and they had a paper clip taped to a piece of paper on the wall. And over the 20-hour mission of that unmanned aircraft, that paper clip weight cost them 5 miles. So the weight really is a significant component. We need to be able to talk to that payload. We need to know what's it doing. We have some payloads that are blind, where you send them off and you recover the aircraft 10 hours later and you hope it worked. That's not what we like to do. We like to be able to interrogate the payload and find out what's happening, or to be able to get streaming data back. You're flying the Trans-Alaska Pipeline looking for people along it. You want to know right then and there where the people are. You don't want to wait 10 hours. So a lot of that is developing how do we do those communications, how do we stream that data. Of course, we need to do command and control of the aircraft, which is not trivial in Alaska. The first time we started working with NASA on their UAS traffic management program, they said, all you need is a cellular-enabled iPad. And we said, our prime range has no cell phone coverage. And they looked like we were speaking Greek. They have funded us well to overcome the Greek challenge. But it is a case where things are somewhat different up here. We don't have the communication system they have in the lower 48. The other thing is they're trying to figure out what frequencies to use for unmanned aircraft so they don't conflict with various things, and so that you have a very reliable, robust system. So they came out with, okay, we're going to use 5.03 gigahertz and then transfer to satellite communications. Well, 5.3 gigahertz does not transmit far in the atmosphere, so you'd only use it around the airport. And then you go to satellite communications, and they had to confess that they've never tested that. Well, we've tested that up here. It's a problem, because Iridium turns their satellites off as they go over the pole so they don't step on each other. So we, flying north of Alaska, will have 3 to 5 minute gaps in our Iridium coverage. A lot can happen to an unmanned aircraft in 3 to 5 minutes. Now, the good news is there's nobody up there at our altitudes to hit. But still, you want to make sure that you can communicate with your unmanned aircraft. You know if it's encountering icing so you can get it out of the situation. So working on how to develop those robust command and control aspects are something we're working on, and is something that is going to benefit folks, again, here in Alaska on our missions. So in order to do that, you have to have a really good crew. And we've got one of the best in the country. We have people who flew Predator when it was a prototype system for the Army before it became Air Force. We have people who have basically operated unmanned aircraft under every conceivable harsh condition. And these guys are mission-oriented. They will get it done safely, and they will get it done quickly. I will have to explain to the university later why it occurred the way it did, but it will happen. And if you want to see the team get excited, send them on a search and rescue mission, because it is a purpose, it is immediate, it's life-saving. They love it. Not the fact that they had to do it, but the fact that they can help. So we've got a fleet. We fly everything from little tiny ones we call tiny whoops, which are about 4 inches across, downstairs in the Mather Library. You can actually check one out with your Polar Express card. For stress relief, we have an elevated hula hoop course that is netted off. It's popular, especially in our finals. And then, so everything from there, where we are doing outreach in STEM, all the way to our 16-foot wingspan Sea Hunter. Sea Hunter is, let's go ahead and get this started, since I'll talk about her. So this is a 16-foot wingspan, 300-pound unmanned aircraft. We think she has 11 and a half hours of endurance. We just finished flying 3,000 nautical miles over the St. Lawrence Seaway looking for North Atlantic right whales. And we found blue whales and sharks and ships and all sorts of good stuff. And yes, we did see a whole bunch of North Atlantic right whales.
Payload?
The payload on this one is approximately 40 pounds. We're flying her heavy just because we have so many different payloads that everybody wants. And so it's a function of optimizing, and we're going to have to make her a little bit more plug and play in terms of pulling things in and out. I used to show that video and say she's always taken off and landed by a computer. She'd never been landed by hand. We actually had our first manual landing after a twin engine shutdown in Tennessee, and the pilot got her safely to the surface. He earned his pay for the next several years. But she is a very reliable bird, and we've been doing some great work with her in Canada. We have 2 aircraft, so it's one system. You always have at least a duplicate. We'd like to have another, but my budget won't let us. Yeah, no, that's why Jimmy's here.
What does one of those cost?
So we got a deal with the manufacturer, so we are basically flying a prototype. If you were to buy one brand new, equipped the way we are, you're talking probably $600,000 a plane. That does not include the ground control station, everything else.
And
My
then you start
social security won't cover that. huh?
No, yeah, so we don't fly inexpensive aircraft. And that actually is one of the challenges we have in this business. The Part 107, which is the commercial ones that people can now get a license to fly anything under 55 pounds, up to 400 feet within line of sight, daytime, and you can get waivers to everything there but the weight, means that the small unmanned aircraft industry has really taken off commercially by itself. So with the university not being allowed to compete with the state of Alaska, the state of Alaska is not allowed to compete with commercial. The moment we pioneer something and it becomes a routine commercial, we have to step out if someone else wants to do it. So that's a real challenge for us. So we are doing the things that the other folks can't do, which are the larger aircraft, higher altitudes, more complicated missions. So
anything that breaks the barriers becomes research, testing. We're trying to do the next step.
Yeah, so we're trying to stay at least 3 steps ahead of the industry, and that is a challenge. And you will see us, there are days when we're under the table sucking our thumbs because it's like, how on earth are we going to keep this up?
So is that a federal requirement, or is that
That's the state of Alaska,
state of Alaska?
that we can't compete with commercial. So that is a challenge for us. But in terms of being able to pioneer things and do the research spin, this is something where we work with partners, and a lot of these are missions that eventually they will do, but we can still help with safety training, we can help develop the next step. And so there are ways for us to stay involved. We just don't get the routine commercial baseline funding, which would help tremendously.
Well, Cathy, to enlarge on that point, the University of Alaska has got it in its charter not to compete against what John knows. And we've run across that a dozen times in Alaska in the last 50 years. Are you still running into that kind of thing that's in our charter, don't compete against the local?
We've had several cases at the university recently where companies have called us on it. And when they do, we have to step down or partner with them.
Well, who's making the complaint?
Usually the corporate entity.
Yes, usually the corporate entity, and it hasn't been us. We've been very good about maintaining that wall, but some other organizations inside UAF have been called on it. Some of the data providers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, we actually turn down quite a bit of work because we can't do it. We're not allowed to do it. It's routine commercial. So we get called and asked to do things, and we have to say, sorry, we can help find you somebody, or we can train you to do your own work, but we can't actually be your provider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good news is there are some good Alaskan companies we can spin things to, but it doesn't help us in the long run. So.
Now, you mentioned St. Lawrence Seaway, Tennessee, so these birds are getting around.
Yeah, so these birds were built by Griffin Aerospace in Huntsville, Alabama. And so that's where they've been based for the most part. And we've been doing the test flights in Pulaski, Tennessee, which is just over the border. Her past 3 missions have all been for Transport Canada, and I'll be getting to that, actually, I think, next slide. And so what happens is Transport Canada is working on, their mission is surveillance, search and rescue, northern maritime issues. They want to be able to operate unmanned aircraft out of their northern airports. They have no experience with unmanned aircraft, and they are looking at larger unmanned aircraft, but they want to develop some of the concept of operations for operating out of these airports before they actually commit to a long term. So we are their test phase. And if you know anything about the Canadians, it's don't buy American, buy Canadian, and First Nation first. Yeah. So they knew they didn't have the expertise. They knew they would not be able to sole source. So they sole sourced to an Inuit-owned company in Iqaluit, Nunavut, who proceeded to sole source to us. So Transport Canada is indeed getting us, which is what they wanted, but we happen to have an intermediary. So it's a partnership with the 3 of us. But so we are helping them develop that concept of operations. And so we are working with their regulators on how do we do this. So we do things in Canada with the regulators' permission the FAA will not let us do in the United States. The toughest nut to crack in the United States is that beyond visual line of sight of the pilot in command. Canada has let us go 80 nautical miles beyond visual line of sight in their airspace, outside of restricted airspace, going between different air traffic control centers, including Montreal Center. And we only wanted to, they said, we know we just need to go 80 nautical miles. We actually had to turn the aircraft to break our radio line of sight link to prove to them we could fly satellite communication. So it's been a great set of tests. Over the St. Lawrence Seaway, we were flying and we're like, the meteorological conditions here are really bad. We're already filing instrument flight rules, flight permissions. Can we fly in clouds? Can we fly IMC, instrument meteorological conditions? They revised the special flight operating certificate to allow us to do that. So then we proceeded to fly 3,000 nautical miles over the St. Lawrence Seaway. So the regulators have been there watching us. They've sat side by side. They've watched what happens when we've lost link and how we responded. At the end of that, one of our guys looked at them and said, would you have changed anything about our policies or procedures? They're like, nope, you guys did everything right.
These are all Canadian
These are
officials watching you?
So NAV Canada, which is their equivalent of the FAA, plus Transport Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We had the Minister of Defense appear at our very first operation in Canada because we were flying out of Alma, Quebec, which was their brand new Unmanned Aircraft Center of Excellence that had been stood up the week before we got there. And we were their first mission. And so everybody under the sun appeared. And our team was trying to do tests and evaluation, which is very different from them in terms of mindset than a real world mission. And they're like, everybody under the sun is tromping through. It's the mayor of the town, it's members of parliament, it is everybody, and including the Minister of Defense. And our team had said, we don't actually want you there because, you're going to want to help and you might get in the way. This is what pilots tell directors. And so I didn't show up. And so the Minister of Defense showed up when I wasn't there. So the head of the Sea Hunter team who told me that, nope, you're just getting in the way, had to brief the Minister of Defense. So he's still getting grief about that one. But we have been pushing limits. So with them, all of that information that we're learning in terms of operating off of different runways under different conditions, we are flying as real aircraft in and out of commercial airports. The intent is actually next summer, we will fly out of Ottawa International. So,
and currently we're working on permissions with FAI. They would like us there.
Yeah,
actually.
Does your crew have to be there, or can they be remote?
They could be remote. It's much better to have them near the runway where you're doing landing, in case you have to do a manual landing. But yeah, we actually could fly from hundreds of miles away. In terms
How
of
far?
Hundreds of miles easily. I mean, we could pull off maneuvers like they do with Creech Air Force Base, where we're halfway around the world because we're flying by computer.
So you say Creech Air Force Base? That's where the Predators are.
That's where they fly Predators. They fly Predators in Afghanistan from Creech, let's be clear. But it is much better if we're there and we're operating, nearby. So we have a ground control station, we park at the airport, and this most recent mission we were flying out of the Gaspé Airport. We have pictured the Sea Hunter taxiing past commercial air traffic. Medevacs for going in and out. We were trackable because we are transpondered on any flight tracking software. You could put in our tail number and watch us in FlightAware. So I could always tell if the team was up, whether or not they told me they were up by just logging in and seeing whether or not they'd launched. And FlightAware did something weird where they were flying straight lines, but FlightAware made it look like they were flying like drunken sailors. But had to do with some of the weird mapping in the program. But so it is a case where we're actually acting as real aircraft. We talk to air traffic control. We're larger, we're above 500 feet, so we're in the manned airspace acting as manned aircraft. And we're feeding that all to the FAA. We just scored a major coup. We just received $25 million in government surplus in the form of 5 unmanned aircraft systems. These are Sentry HP UAS. They were loaded at Naval Postgraduate School last week. We expect them here, thank you, Lyndon, in about 3 weeks. And so in this particular case, these are aircraft that we intentionally got to work here in Alaska. These are military spec. They're very solid, and it turns out the team that built and flew these, trained the Naval Postgraduate School folks, is actually our Sea Hunter team. So we're getting them their babies back. So right now, Jimmy is their biggest friend. So in this particular case, these will be good aircraft for flying wildfires, for doing search and rescue, for doing domain awareness off the coast. These will be good test aircraft for us. And given that the grand total between the State of Alaska fee and shipping is about $75,000 or something, they're far cheaper than Sea Hunter. We can do a lot of pioneering with them.
And they came with some nice payloads, and what's really interesting about these is they can carry up to 75 to 100-pound payload, which is significant. It's more than Sea Hunter can. So
What's its endurance?
6 to 8 hours at
80 knots is
yeah,
what.
I think it's 80 knots like Sea Hunter is, and
And it's fuel?
Yep.
Is it, well,
we
is
usually
it gas or fuel?
we usually use 110 low lead.
Okay.
Well, I think a couple of these are two-stroke and for low, but one of them I think is a diesel.
Yeah, you did say we have one heavy fuel.
Yeah, we have one diesel.
What's their manufacturing age? When were they manufactured?
Well, some of these
How old are they?
were like 2009, but there are some that were brand new and have never been flown. So we ended up with a range.
Yeah.
All right.
And Naval Postgraduate School took very, very good care of them, and the last person to fly them was part of our Sea Hunter team. So this was a score for the state of Alaska. So that payload is important. So we do a lot of work, being the university. We don't have DoD budget, so we don't have a bunch of the zeros. So we take commercial off-the-shelf technology and we adapt it. So this is a commercially purchased FLIR camera, and the video actually is much clearer than this. Forward-looking infrared. So we 3D printed a gimbal. We stuck it on a small unmanned aircraft. This is flying looking at the Coast Guard cutter Hickory in Homer. And it's good enough you can tell I'm wearing a skirt on the dock because the resolution is that good. So this is, you know, a $5,000 to $7,000 camera versus a lot of the very expensive higher grade cameras, which will be $100,000. So this is something that we can use to spot moose and, you know, muskox and do search and rescue, but it's at a reasonable price. So this is where we develop these payloads to meet a bunch of research and other missions.
And to Cathy's point a little bit, a lot of what we're helping do is help the industry understand what their needs actually are instead of what their wants are. Everybody wants the newest best thing, when really you just need the appropriate data, and that's what our expertise comes in.
Yeah, and our first question, everybody, is what do you actually need? And, you know, they want the moon, and I'm like, no, really, what do you actually need? What is success for you? Then we can determine what payload, and that will help determine what aircraft and what concept of operations. And sometimes you'll come to us and you'll say, I want this, and we're like, that does not exist. Let us work with you to see what we can do. So in terms of opportunities for unmanned aircraft in Alaska, one of the key things here and why you'd want to use them is safety. We have a lot of manned aircraft flying dangerous missions. Flying the Trans-Alaska Pipeline with helicopters twice a day is not a safe endeavor. So these are cases where we can replace manned aircraft on dangerous missions. You want to deliver goods to the Pribilofs without, you know, putting someone at risk, being able to fly below flight minimums, fly IFR and IMC. You could do that with an unmanned aircraft. So there are a bunch of things that we want to do in terms of cargo delivery. We've got folks who want to do medical device delivery, natural resources. You know, we can do gravel piles that move. You know, what amount of ore did you pull out of something? Is your pipeline leaking? Fish and wildlife surveys, mapping and surveying. There's just a whole host of Alaskan missions that are important.
If you think of anything that's done with manned aviation right now in terms of surveying, research, we're looking at not replacing that, but assisting with that, because a lot of times what you're looking at is those people are up there in a plane mowing the lawn with a plane back and forth, and it's just really boring, monotonous flying, and you're just looking at potential accidents, and so we're looking at mitigating a lot of that.
Yeah, when to use unmanned aircraft, dirty, dull, and dangerous. Those are the three key things. Otherwise, manned aircraft may be a cheaper solution.
It was released a couple of months ago in Anchorage. There was a company being formed to create a package freight delivery outfit based in Anchorage. Do you know? Are you familiar with those guys?
What's the name of the company?
I can't remember. But they are creating the machine here and the system here for Alaska use.
Yeah, so we're under non-disclosure with some folks in terms of doing cargo delivery and development of their systems. So we really can't talk about some of the ones we're doing. But there is a lot of interest in doing hub and spoke delivery using unmanned aircraft. With Amazon, et cetera, they're concerned about the last mile. Up here, we're concerned about the last 100 miles. So.
But yes, there is a big interest in that as an industry in Alaska.
Yep. And of course, with the Arctic opening, how do you get search and rescue on site if there's a cruise ship accident in the North Slope? How do you monitor illegal fishing or which vessels are up there? That is a case where unmanned aircraft will be very, very useful. So that's one of the things that we really want to use the sentries to help explore some of these. And you can do beautiful mapping. So this is a three-dimensional map of sea ice up at Utqiagvik. And the top is real color and the bottom is done by height. And all this is taking photographs and having enough overlap to be able to do a three-dimensional model. And you can do absolutely beautiful things with that. So that is the toe of Ayala Glacier as flown by our responder aircraft at 2,000 feet. Launched from a National Park Service vessel, flown over the aircraft, over the glacier, kept in line of sight. And you can create a beautiful three-dimensional model.
And that is going to be in the visitor center in Seward, right?
Yeah, Kenai Fjords National Park.
And it's going to be, I think, 4 foot by.
I think it's 3 by 2.
Is it 3? It was the bigger one.
Okay, I don't remember.
But it's going to be 3D printed.
Yeah. We can do emergency response. We've been monitoring the breakup of the Yukon River at Circle, looking for the potential to use these to determine where ice jams are. We flew responder, we downloaded the data, we mosaicked it, and we uploaded it to NOAA's emergency response system within 4 hours. Now, 4 hours sounds like a long time, but keep in mind that was 4 hours using the Circle School bandwidth. So we actually had it down and had it mosaicked a whole lot faster. We do have permission to fly the entire Yukon River with Sea Hunter for this mission. It requires a chase plane right now. We are trying to work with FAA to get rid of that requirement. We've done oil spill remediation in situ. So this is up at Poker Flat. And they basically created the fake icebergs in the lake because all the real icebergs had melted because it was a beautiful week. And so they went ahead and released oil into this to look at oil and ice. They went by, released a herding agent from one unmanned aircraft to cause the oil to clump together to a thick enough layer to burn, went by with a torch and lit it. And the team loves this and they want a flamethrower now.
We didn't have the picture with the flamethrower. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I missed the point. What did your UAS do?
You could do in situ oil spill remediation. So it caused the oil to clump together, and then you could burn it to get rid of it.
So you did drop something from the plane?
They used a torch and were able to touch it to light it.
Okay.
It was not dropped.
It's still connected somewhat to the plane.
Yeah, this is something the federal government has been given certain permission to drop things for backfiring, but you cannot drop something from an unmanned aircraft, which is why you always see Amazon winch stuff down, etc. It's because they can't literally drop it. So we helped pioneer, and I told you about the challenges we had with pioneering. We helped E&I pioneer the flare stack monitoring. They originally had to shut down the flare field, send somebody up, look at the parts, determine what needed to be replaced, order them, have them delivered, have someone go up, make the change, and then put the flare field back up. We can fly it in thermal infrared and visible, determine what parts need to be replaced, have them ordered on site, and only then do they take the stacks, the flare field down to change the parts and bring it back up. The savings is $1 to $3 million per stack, which is huge. And this is now being done commercially by companies up on the North Slope. And of course, this one is right down your alley, Mike. We can also see heat loss in buildings. So we can do nice three-dimensional modeling of various buildings. And we've talked with the campus actually about flying all their roofs during winter to see where their heat loss.
Yeah, I had a friend that used to do that by hiring a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
He you did the pipeline and also a lot of major roofs around the state.
Yeah. So this is a slightly older slide. We were working with BP and took a 14 kilogram methane detector down to 1 kilogram. And we're flying over some of their pipelines to see if we could spot leaks. Well, as of 3 weeks ago, we flew Hillcorp Energy's pipelines down in Cook Inlet with a brand new methane detector that we just helped develop. And we were able to determine their fugitive emissions in sources they knew about. It was a huge success. So we are working with companies to develop these technologies to be able to do infrastructure monitoring with unmanned aircraft.
Well, that's a very important thing. The background for that, of course, is the federal government would like to reduce the actual leakage of methane in the country from about, say, 5%, which has been tested, down to 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Trump just came up with reversing that. If you follow that in the last couple of days, you know. So you're developing a technology where you can actually fly over with a spectrometer and find a leak. So we could actually get that from that 5 to 2% with UAS.
Yep, that's what we're working on.
Do you measure the methane coming out of the flaring operations?
We haven't flown over the flare stacks with the new detectors, but it would probably be pretty straightforward. We were flying over actual pipelines and over their infrastructure.
What kind of contribution to global warming would that be? That Alaska's responsible?
I don't know. I haven't done the actual methane calculations out of the North Slope.
But methane is many, many times more potent greenhouse gas than CO2 that we're worried about.
When we have those natural gas leaks, they're significant. We are working with NASA in terms of developing the safety case for flying small unmanned aircraft under 400 feet in the atmosphere. And a lot of this is developing some of the technologies that are then going to be applicable to the larger aircraft, including sense and avoid. Sense and avoid means the aircraft automatically determines if there's some other aircraft, unmanned or manned, in the atmosphere, and then will automatically, without human intervention, move to avoid. And so we are working on those technologies. We actually achieved that with a manned aircraft in the Fairbanks International Airspace under one of the university's permissions to fly. And so our system picked up its ADS-B and intentionally moved. We are working with a bunch of companies to add this in. And so we are developing those safety cases that are going to be needed so that if for some reason we do ever lose link, we still will not hit anybody. And the whole goal here is to advance safety and to make sure there is never a manned-unmanned incident. This is the real nut to crack, beyond visual line of sight along Trans-Alaska Pipeline. This was actually what we call an extended visual line of sight flight. So it meant we had daisy-chained observers. So the aircraft was always within the line of sight of one of our personnel with a radio. But it was beyond the visual line of sight of the pilot in command. It took us a year to get permission to do that operation. And shortly thereafter, the FAA said, oh, that does work, and then proceeded to give everybody permission to do daisy-chained observers. This is source of our frustration with the FAA. But it is a case where it was a pioneering thing for us. We were streaming that video live. So as they were flying, I was sitting in my office in Akisofu watching them stream the pipeline video. The goal is eventually to be able to have the unmanned aircraft autonomously go along the pipeline, have people be able to watch it, and then also have autonomous change detection so that the aircraft will alert if it sees something that's shifted. So instead of white, suddenly have a big black spot, it would identify that and alarm. So we are working with this, and the beyond visual line of sight is the real problem. This is where the FAA will not let you fly. We have been working very, very hard with them on safety cases to allow us to fly.
But in Canada, you can.
In Canada, they'll let us.
So who's allowing you to fly? FAA?
In Canada's beyond visual line of sight, Transport Canada, NAV Canada.
But I mean, that's the regulating body here.
That's the regulating body in Canada. Here, the FAA does not let people fly beyond visual line of sight. The number of people who can do that is a handful, and it's been through pilot programs and other things.
A lot of it's in restricted airspace where they're not going to be seen
Yep.
by other manned aircraft to begin with. And that's really the only way it's been accomplished in the United States.
Yep.
So would that be in
So here's a really good example. When Gray Eagle leaves LAD or Lad Field, it's chased by 2 Apaches.
Yeah.
Or a Chinook. They
You
have
have
to.
to keep it in line of sight, which is
Until they
stupid
get
beyond belief.
Redundant.
Because the air traffic controllers,
Right.
we love Gray Eagle. Gray Eagle burns a direct line in our radar screen. You know, it stays on target, it stays on track. Whereas general aviation's like, oh, let's go look at this, let's go look at this, and you know, all over the place. They're like, we love Gray Eagle. But the concern is that something will happen, you'll lose link, and there will be an accident with Gray Eagle. So they want someone who can take over control of the aircraft if something happens. And and Gray Eagle has, you know, tremendous amount of time on it. It's a very, very reliable system. And I would say it's more reliable than most general aviation aircraft by far. So it is a case where it doesn't make sense. So we are working on trying to break that beyond visual line of sight aspect. This is an important step towards this. So the UAS integration pilot program is the result of an executive order from President Trump in November 8th last year. That announcement set off complete and total chaos in the unmanned aircraft industry, because what it did is that they wanted a state, local, or tribal government to put in a series of missions and to help further the commercial integration of unmanned aircraft into the U.S. And so 149 different groups were formed to compete for this. 10 of them were granted. We got one. So we led the state of Alaska effort. Shelley Hughes tried to get it, so the state of Alaska put in only one proposal under us. We had a discussion with the Department of Transportation on who should do it. The agreement was we do it because we were a test site, so we had the reputation. And that we would go in as one. Anchorage decided to go their own way with a different partner. We had worked with them to try to get them on our team, and with 20 minutes to go to submit, they had not signed the teaming agreement. If there was not a teaming agreement signed, they could not be a partner in the proposal. So with 20 minutes to go, we wrote them out, and theirs failed.
You said Anchorage UAA?
No.
Municipality of Anchorage.
Municipality of Anchorage.
Yes, the Muni pulled at the last possible moment. So one of the first emails I got congratulating us was the municipality of Anchorage saying, is there still a way to come work with us? But in our team, we had 21 partners, and these are the partners. Now, this is an interesting list. So we've got Fairbanks North Star Borough, we have the North Slope Borough in terms of some of the local governments. We have aircraft manufacturers in situ and Latitude. We have energy companies, Alyeska and Hillcorp. We have a tribal, that was actually Cherokee Nation. We have Department of Transportation, Fish and Game. We have Alaska operators, K2 Dronautics, Alaska Aerial Media, Aquilo. We have national level operators, Trumbull Unmanned, Unmanned Systems Alaska. We have technology advisors in here, people who are handling the UTM system. We have folks who are, so that's the under 400 feet. We have people here who build the sensitive void technologies. So we had a very strong partnership. And how many hours has our team flown? Over 1 million. Because in situ has over 1 million experience, mainly Iraq, Afghanistan, other places. So very, very strong program. We were selected. We had put in 5 airspaces. They selected our projects on 2. And those were the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System and Hillcorp Energy Pipeline, with the goal being able to do linear infrastructure safely beyond visual line of sight. We have a dedicated IPP program manager to help overcome the challenges. So we have somebody who is our voice in the FAA and communicates what we're doing to the entire FAA, and they have taken us out of the normal process. We go to the front of the line for any permission we're requesting. And they work through it with us for the safety cases to be able to do this. So this is very, very important, and we're making great strides, and there will be a very important announcement in Anchorage on September 25th in terms of our first IPP successes.
Why Anchorage?
Because it happens, well, no, it's because it's our UAS interest group meeting, and we alternate years,
Oh, that's right.
and this year it's in Anchorage, so unfortunately they get that. But it does mean that we've got a better chance of getting a bunch of the politicians. So the invites have gone out to the governor, who looks like he may make it, the senators and a whole bunch of other folks, Secretary Chow of DOT. So this has been interesting because they want economic baseline reports. They want to see what the impact of doing these replacements with unmanned aircraft is. So we had to do some preliminary analyses of if we were going to fly the entire Trans-Alaska Pipeline with unmanned aircraft, how much money would it save? The answer is hundreds of thousands of dollars per year before you even get into buying helicopters, unmanned aircraft, et cetera.
So we're talking millions.
Potentially.
And not only that, but you're removing a liability as well.
Yeah, it's safer.
That's
the key thing. And safety is not one of their economic baseline report components. So that's something we keep hitting them on. This is safety. We've had people die doing this. This is a case of, just the savings in fuel and maintenance. Yeah, it's mainly fuels and maintenance on that front, because the unmanned aircraft actually takes more manpower to run. You've got a pilot and observer if it's the helicopter, but we've got a team of 4 for using a large unmanned aircraft. So in spite of that, they still save significant money. What we told the FAA and the Alaska win is for us to be able to operate 24/7, 365 days per year beyond visual line of sight by Alaskan companies. That is our goal. And we have 2 years under IZP to do it. And we're pushing them hard. So they've learned that we just won't do something for show. They wanted an early win, and they said, well, why don't you go do an extended visual line of sight, call it a beyond visual line of sight, because it is beyond visual line of sight of the pilot and command. And we said, we've already done that. That's nothing new. That's not a win for us. So we've been pushing hard in terms of getting actual real things. Night operations is something they're concerned about. Well, up on the North Slope or here in Fairbanks in the middle of winter, we need night operations. Daytime, cakewalk, we can do that in summer, but when it comes to winter, that night operation is not just a function of, oh, well, you have the rest of the day to fly. We don't have the rest of the day to fly. So it's been an education with the FAA. And of course, we've got operational challenges they have no clue of. We do some work out of Elliptic Point up north, and polar bears have mauled people. Luckily, not any of us. Unfortunately, it was Air Force personnel, I believe. It's cold and dark. That's a challenge with some unmanned aircraft systems. People bring stuff up for the lower 48, think I can throw it in the air and it'll fly. No, that does not happen. And our favorite case is NASA. They brought a Sierra up to fly Misopex in 2013. They lost it due to icing on the first sortie out of Elliptic. We flew 16 with Scan Eagle. So it is UAF 16, NASA zip. And you can't always get the unmanned aircraft back, and their case washed up 6 months later at having served as a current buoy. So they did get it back. It was not operational after saltwater for 6 months, but they did actually get it back. That poor GPS is a problem. Our vertical solutions aren't good because the GPS satellites are low on the horizon. The iridium coverage, as I said, comes and goes. You get the icing of airframes and payloads. We're doing a lot of work with NASA and others on how do you avoid icing. Anti-icing coatings, active de-icing systems. We spent 2 days in the NASA Glenn Icing Research Tunnel last year. We were part of a project where we got free wind tunnel time. We were told the project was probably $1 million worth of time. And we got 2 of the 5 days. And this is going to be continuing. In fact, we're starting an icing consortium.
Yeah, we're going back.
And we will be leading the consortium. So they've decided that we have the competency and the capability.
Where is that?
It's in Ohio. It's in, I want to say Columbus.
Is it Columbus or Dayton?
Okay.
Oh, Dayton. You're right. It's Dayton.
They have a lot of icing problems.
If you make a breakthrough with a fluid or a
GE's aviation.
can you patent that on behalf of the University of Alaska?
We could, but we're not the ones actually developing the coding. We're doing a lot of the testing. We're working with other companies who've developed the technology. But yes, if we develop that, we could patent. Exposed pilots and observers. I joke about this one because the pilots often get to fly in the nice out of the nice warm trailer, and the observer has to be the one who stands outside. And on missions, I am the lowest person on the totem pole because I don't actually fly the aircraft, so I'm often the observer. So I'm very aware of that one. The beyond visual line of sight permitting for us is a major challenge. And then, of course, we have significant manned aircraft in surprising areas. Do not fly the Hillcore pipelines on the west side of Cook Inlet the day before hunting season.
Uh-oh.
Planes, helicopters going every conceivable direction, and it wasn't safe. Our team said, we're not doing it. This is unsafe. These guys are not filing flight plans. They're flying like drunken hummingbirds. They're flying way below the 500 feet you're supposed to be flying, because of course they're looking for the perfect moose, etc. So, I mean, these are cases where you have to be aware of it and you have to take it into account. So how do you successfully operate up here? You plan, you test, you practice. You test your stuff before you take it out. You talk with people who are used to working in the Arctic. You modify your equipment and your standard operating procedures to take all these things into account, and then you keep testing and planning, because it's not always going to go right, and you want it to be safe, so you want to make sure that you have as much redundancy built into your system as possible. So when we fly Sea Hunter, we have 3 command and control links. We have a 900 megahertz, a 2.4 gigahertz, and we have satellite communications. So if we lose one, we have 2 others. And so when do we use them? Dirty, dull, and dangerous is when you want to use them. You want to be able to make measurements in remote portions of Alaska. That requires being that beyond visual line of sight. You know, it makes no sense to take a helicopter in to plant visual observers down a salmon stream every 2 miles so that you can fly an unmanned aircraft to do that.
Another good example of this in terms of the safety is we're looking to work with NOAA to do our SOTA mission off of the North Slope, and to get to where we want to fly beyond visual line of sight, they're requiring us to chase a plane over the Arctic Ocean 12 miles.
Makes no sense. It's far more dangerous to have that manned aircraft beyond the coast than it is for it to fly beyond visual line of sight with no aircraft present. And we've been doing all the safety calculations to prove that it is safer than 1 in a billion chance of an accident. I've gotten really good at the probability calculations. You know, we need to modify for here, and we assume that this is going to be a high-tech economic driver. We can have people work in their communities, be place-based, do this kind of technology. We are going to be needing to do the beyond visual line of sight for resource development and other things. We think that this has tremendous potential, especially when we break that beyond visual line of sight, to be a game changer. So with that, I'm going to ask if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Go for it.
How do you harden the aircraft for icing conditions and cold temperatures?
So we have done things like 3D printed caps to go over electronics to help keep them warmer. We have been known to use chemical hand warmers to keep batteries warmer. Coolers are awesome with chemical hand warmers to keep batteries warm, because the moment you put it out in the cold, your cranking power goes down. Once you've got it up and operating, then you can usually maintain. We have cases where there's some things you can do in terms of waterproofing motors. You want to make sure that what we're doing with NASA is determining where the ice might form so that we can try coatings on those areas so that we decrease the chance that we will get any icing. And if we melt it off, that it will actually slide off the wing instead of sliding off the area that's warmed and hitting the cold wing further back and freezing there. These are things you don't think of until you actually see them happen. So it's a whole, back and forth in terms of trying various things, what works, etc.
Yeah. Oh, it's very interesting what you're doing there. You're sort of pioneers in the new field. And of course, the military is using predators, extensively, and I imagine that would be a good source of getting personnel after they retire.
Yeah, we steal a lot of people from the military. Some of them, a lot of our team actually are, we've had some predator, but a lot of shadow and Raven type operators. We also have folks who are actual manned aircraft aviators who were RC when they were kids and have the skills. So we've stolen some Chinook flight instructors, and so we've got a bunch of flight instructors on our team. So in terms of our unmanned aircraft pilot training, we've got some of the best in the business saying, you are going to treat this like a real aircraft. We are going to train you like it's a real aircraft, and we go from there.
And for us, it is a real aircraft. It is. It really needs to be treated that way.
And the federal government has them as real aircraft. So if you try to shoot one down, you are violating Title 18. It is sabotage of an aircraft. and it could be $250,000 in fines and 20 years imprisonment.
So Cathy, having a Board of Regents member here, what do you see as your budget? Is it expanding? What's the component between state funding and maybe research funding? Any of those things?
Okay, so right now, between us and contractors, and then keep in mind we have various faculty who aren't getting direct money from the state portion of our budget because they're getting project money. They're not included in this number. We have 18 full-time staff. And we do have a line item in the university budget that was put in by Senators Cahill and Kelly and Representative Thompson that I don't talk a lot about because as the university was being cut, we didn't want to be the toll. But that supports a lot of the baseline. And so most of what I see that as our purpose is using that money to benefit the state of Alaska. And the project money we have coming in, we have a diversity of funding. So we get a fair amount of money from NASA, but we also have good money from NOAA, Forest Service, Alyeska, Hillcorp. We're just trying to go down the mental list here. We have SBIRs from the Air Force. We have quite a diversity. We're finally getting FAA funding, which FAA is the master of we want you to do everything for nothing. So I'm calling myself the mistress of the no money win. Test sites had no money. IPP has no money, but the partners are putting money in on these various things. So
Our goal is to not draw Fund 1 money.
Yeah, our purpose is to get weaned off state money. Having that state money, though, gives us a level of stability when the grant cycles do that.
Right.
And it allows us to refresh equipment, et cetera, that we otherwise wouldn't be able to touch. But it also means that when the troopers call and say, we need you to do search and rescue, can you please help? That's state of Alaska money, and that's a good use of it, and we're there. So we're working on developing, the folks we work with, but it is, it is a challenge because it is a very competitive market. A lot of people don't want to come all the way to Alaska to test. And because we are one of the best in the business, we have a lot of people shooting at us. So we need to stay about 4 steps ahead of the posse in order to be properly positioned.
A good example of this is Senator Hoeven from North Dakota has been ardently pushing the fact that North Dakota is the Arctic.
Oh, yeah, I cut that one off in the past.
Yeah, they are the Arctic.
A little lower 48.
Yeah, no, just they are the Arctic when it comes to testing Arctic research.
Northrop Grumman was putting Global Hawks in North Dakota, so they're like, well, they're going to be doing Arctic missions with the Arctic test site. To which I said, hell no. If you don't live in the Arctic, you cannot call yourself the Arctic test site. And so they've backed off on that because we read them the Riot Act, and the next step was going to be having Senators Murkowski and Sullivan read them the Riot Act. But yeah, they have backed way off and are now apologetic, and it's now more of a can we work with you? And so, I mean, there are definite potentials there.
Are there any opportunities for a degree program through UAS?
Yep, so we actually have, and this has been a little bit back burner just because we've been so busy, we actually have courses set for working with an AAS and having people learn how to pilot. We will be training researchers to do the piloting for their projects under the small UAS rule. So we have currently an aerospace engineering minor. So you can actually take courses in building unmanned aircraft and payloads at the University of Alaska, and they're distance delivered to Anchorage. So it is a case where Professor Hatfield teaches a course and has students in both campuses building unmanned aircraft. And so, they can compare notes and work things forward. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And what we do is we talk to folks in terms of the potential for unmanned aircraft. You don't have to just be getting an engineering degree. We are actually developing a course in film for cinematography. You can do remote sensing, geology, physics. All of these things can lead you into working with unmanned aircraft because of that payload aspect. And so by not just focusing on just the aerodynamics or the piloting, you really broaden it for students. And when we do school outreaches around here, we do talk to students about what are the careers and what kind of courses do you need to take.
We've been very successful with our STEM program from the FAA. They're very, very happy with what we've been doing.
Yeah, so we ran a 21-student summer camp. We asked Fairbanks North Star Borough
Wow.
teachers to recommend students who needed just that little hands-on push to get them engaged, and each student was able to build an unmanned aircraft, first-person view, fly it in a drone race at the end of the week in the Patty Ice Arena,
Oh.
which we netted off, and we had a whole course for them to go through. And they got to take them home, and we told them we'd help them with repairs the first couple of times, and they have brought them in, and with green blades, so they've obviously been cutting grass with them in terms of the landings and takeoff.
Right.
But they're using them, and the kids had a great time, and our FAA program managers for this project came, and we have pictures of them standing at Patty Ice, center ice, you know, with all the students, and just the biggest smiles on everybody's faces. The program manager liked what our team did with the students so well. They told us they're renewing the funding for 3 years. So we will be able to do more of this. We're doing road shows as a result of this. So we were down in Delta Junction a couple of weeks ago with their middle school aviation program. And it is a case where when we do these presentations, we talk about all the different careers and the fact you want to take business courses. You know, you need to be able to communicate, you know, as much as you like the technology, you have to write reports. You know, so some of those things to make sure that they're thinking about, how do I aim myself for a career in this?
Did you have any observers at Red Flag?
We did not, but I did drive by and drool over Global Hawk. She was parked back with this KC-130, 135s. But in terms of Red Flag, we actually are going to be doing, and I need to talk to some of the folks there about this, some anti-jamming testing. So we want to do counter drone, because jamming is counter drone.
Right.
But we got our hands on an Israeli system that apparently is part of their Iron Dome that we are going to test to see if we can keep our unmanned aircraft up when the airspace is being jammed. So, so that we don't get taken down as collateral. So that's going to be a test, and it's wonderful to have a target of opportunity where I don't have to ask the FCC to jam the airspace because I know what their answer will be. No, that will be their answer. But if it's being done already, we can do it on the ground, you know, turn it on, see if we see it, and then do it tethered. So it's safe, we don't have to worry about it taking off, and we can see if it actually does work. And apparently from one of the early Black Dart projects, which are running counter drone, et cetera, a friend of mine who works for the Coast Guard said he saw this one work, and it actually did work. So fingers crossed. Yeah.
So, thinking about like unmanned sort of blending into like fully autonomous, do you see UAS as having the ability to go down that road into fully autonomous, or does that bring in like a whole bunch of like computing and machine?
The talent we've got at UAF, we can do it.
Okay.
And a lot of this also is partnering. So those 21 IPP partners has actually led to a whole bunch of additional partners. Us having that IPP and the recognition and people realizing what we're doing and the work we're doing with NASA, we have more and more technology folks coming to us, wanting to work with us and do the testing. And so we have incredible talent in computing and autonomy at UAF. So we can supplement that with folks from outside and really develop an initiative here. And it's one of the things that was talked about during the kind of future of UA project that was done recently, was the interest in autonomous and how to move that forward, because that's going to be a solution to a lot of our challenges here in Alaska.
And that's the longer road for sure.
Yeah, it really is.
Was there a joint venture airstrip that's being proposed on the North Slope? With
Elliptic Point?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so
Can you
Elliptic
talk
Point,
about
we're,
Right there.
I try to anticipate. So Elliptic Point right now is there's a long-range radar station that's run by the U.S. Air Force, and they have a strip there, and the strip, we were thinking about flying off for the Stratified Ocean Dynamics of the Arctic mission this fall, But DOE did not tamp it down. Originally, they were going to tamp it, revise it for using their Arctic Shark, which is a 625-pound aircraft. Our 150-pound pilot went onto the airstrip and sank. So we figured a 300-pound aircraft with 3 small wheels was not going to be a good solution. So we actually are working with ConocoPhillips, and we are going to fly out of Unmanned. We are very, very grateful to ConocoPhillips for helping us with this. But they're
It cost me
looking
a lot of dinners.
But we are looking at working out of
You got
here.
reimbursed.
Now, if you look at the map on the left, you can see the blue line, and that is the U.S. Air Force footprint, and that is no foreign national. DOE wants to work up here with foreign nationals testing, but they can't get inside that barrier. So they're talking about building a camp with UAF, basically to set it up like the Toolik Lake Research Station, where it's a DOE facility, but it is run by UAF outside of the border, and then be able to have only U.S. nationals inside the Air Force area. DOE has a 2 nautical mile restricted area over Elliptic Point. They've been flying unmanned aircraft out of there. Then it's about 10 nautical miles of FAA-controlled airspace, read the biggest challenge in this entire thing. And then you're into Warning Area 220, which goes 700 miles north and is 40 miles wide, and is specifically designed for unmanned aircraft. So this year, when we fly for the mission we're going to start in about a week and a half, we will be flying in the warning area. And so it will be activated for unmanned aircraft. That's what it is designed for. So the biggest challenge we have is the 10 miles between the restricted airspace and the others.
Where is this?
This is just west of Prudhoe Bay, so you can drive there.
Yeah.
Which for us is huge, because otherwise we did a mission out of Wainwright. It took a C-130 to get the Scan Eagle in.
Ken was happy though.
Yeah. I don't have that budget. But we can drive there, and that's huge in terms of being able to do testing and evaluating. So the one challenge we have right now is we believe the Air Force upgraded their system because they are currently shooting down the DOE data hogs. So we're avoiding the restricted area 2204 at this time, because until we figure out the interference and if we can avoid getting jammed, we're going to avoid the airspace. But it is a case where they're looking for this as a long-term solution for being able to access the Arctic with unmanned aircraft operations.
So where does the funding come from to establish a Toolik Lake-like?
Well, DOE is putting in the seed money, and they are trying to get other folks to coalesce around it, and it's been discussed enough in Washington, D.C. It's one of those projects that the moment somebody says definite, we're going, a bunch of folks are going to pile in. But until they get the definitive, we have enough to start, and Sandia has been working on that front.
There's a lot of research that can be done out of there
Oh,
that they
yeah.
want to pay for.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, it's got a dock, you can do oceanographic, you can do unmanned aircraft, they're doing tethered balloons, they're looking at the meteorology and climate and weather prediction. So there are a bunch of things that this would be a major benefit for.
But the dock and other facilities are within the Air Force facility?
The dock, I don't think the dock is, but the rest are.
Yeah.
And that's just a function of, maintaining the security and keeping everybody out. And most of our team, well, all of our team are U.S. citizens, and a good portion of us hold clearances, so we can get in.
Well, I would assume that the Russians and probably the Chinese are doing quite a bit of work with unmanned.
They are. The Northern Sea Route, which is the one over Russia,
Right.
is incredibly well instrumented with unmanned aircraft. They are doing routine Arctic operations. A number I heard a couple of years ago was one year they put $9 billion worth into unmanned aircraft on the Northern Sea Route. They're turning it into a toll road, and unmanned aircraft is one of the ways they keep an eye on everybody. And the Chinese are definitely doing a lot of work. And if you go to their air shows, you see a lot of things that look an awful lot like things the U.S. has built that have Chinese labels on them.
Yeah.
They're data stealers.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it is well known that DJI, which is the one that everybody buys to fly from their house, is a security risk. So most of the systems we bought that were DJI originally all of the data processing, all of the command and control has been removed, is completely replaced with American autopilots, et cetera. And the one that we use for PR, no batteries are kept in it ever, so that it's only activated when it's outside and doing a PR mission. You know, just to make sure that the security is maintained.
And that makes a big difference too when we're applying for grants or proposals for the federal government, because by us being able to say that we're not using DJI products in our proposal, it gives them that level of security to feel like that data is not going to go back.
Yeah, it's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, we want to make sure that we're protecting our country.
What is DJI?
It's a Chinese company, it's something or other.
They're
The
kind of
Phantoms,
the
the
Phantoms,
Mavics,
the Mavics,
the Inspires.
what everyone's kind of using around. You'll see them.
It's the $1,500 system you could buy at at Sam's Club when they were there.
Yeah.
So
And they're really easy to use. They're they're really, really good machines.
yeah, and
There's
the cameras are pretty nice.
Yeah.
But there's
But the fear is that they're collecting data
yes.
and being transmitted back.
Well, I mean, it's kind
It's
of
actually already
like
been proven
when
they
your
are.
your websites, yeah, they're putting all the data back to a Chinese website. So they get your data where you're flying. And so you don't want them flying over military installations. You don't want them flying over critical infrastructure. So when we do operations over the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, it is not DJI products. They are American autopilots. They are American systems, partly to keep the security of the pipeline. And cyber and physical security are very important issues here.
What kind of grant opportunities do you have for funding?
In terms of us going for funding,
Exactly, yeah.
so it's partly, we can do anything. It's a function of finding the right call. And like DOI had one recently to do wildfire fighting, but the only solution was a system we didn't have. And now they've realized that it actually was a mistake. And so now we're working with them to be called up for wildfire. But it is a case where we have flexibility to respond to almost anything. On the federal side, we just were awarded a $6.5 million IDIQ contract. So basically that is a $6.5 million license to hunt. So other federal agencies, if they want to get money to us, can go through the FAA to get the money to UAF.
So if they're looking at a research project they want done, they can just directly funnel it to the FAA to us. So
And
we don't have to go out and propose for it.
And the Wilson Center at the university, which does infrasound, just received a UARC, which is a military university center of excellence, basically, which allows DoD to NIFR money over in terms of transitioning. And they can get money to us that way because we slipped unmanned aircraft into that proposal. It's predominantly infrasound, but we put unmanned aircraft in. And once one UARC happens to have an area of expertise, the others can't claim it. So we slipped it in and didn't tell anybody. When everybody finds out what we've just done, I'm going to be the most hated person in unmanned aircraft. But we win. You know, this is a benefit for the state of Alaska and for the university. So, but that is a way for DoD to get us money. So if there are opportunities, we will go for them. The real limitation is how much time our personnel have. And we've been going flat out. There was a 2-week period recently. We had 13 of 18 of us out of the office on missions. We're pushed a little thin. Our flight season, they used to say, well, winter, you don't fly. No, we fly all winter.
Yeah. In fact, we need to be flying in the winter because if we're improving the systems to be 24/7, 365, then we need to be operating.
Yeah, so we do things that other folks don't do. One great presentation at a conference, North Dakota got up there and they're like, yeah, we discovered our iPhones freeze at 17, sick inside their system. And of course, Texas got up and said, look at all the airspace we have. And then I got to get up and say, you know, going through my slides, and here's one slide of our airspace. Texas, that's twice yours. And then I hit the slide that showed we flew search and rescue at -35. So of course I had to poke North Dakota. But it is a case of we do operate. And so I've gotten calls from like DITRA saying what we want to know is, you know, you operate in these conditions, you know, how often do you operate? And we're like, well, we operate year round. And like, that's what we wanted to know because they're looking for doing that cold weather testing type thing. So.
Are you getting any interest now or potential money from the urban air mobility crowd around the world?
We actually provided the designated airworthiness representative to Airbus for their Vahana taxi. So that is a mission that's being done down at Pendleton, and so we help. They're doing the process outside of the test sites. They're doing their own approval from the FAA and kind of a pathfinder.
Oregon.
Marines or Pendleton, Oregon?
Pendleton, Oregon.
They're part of the Pan Pacific UAS Test Range Complex under us. But we provided the designated airworthiness representative. So we are actually, in that case, engaged in urban air mobility. And we can honestly now say that we flew for Facebook too.
Yeah, we flew their ACUASI project.
Which was designed for broadband to the world. So that was flown down at Yuma.
But yeah, they gave us permission like a month ago. And that was, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and the project ended about 2 years ago. The non-disclosure agreement was so tight, we referred to them as Voldemort, he who shall not be named.
So Cathy, since the submittal of the application to become one of the 12 sites,
Mm-hmm.
the program has expanded incredibly. I mean, I don't know what the factor is on that, but it's 300 times. I have no idea. But it's just incredible.
We're busy.
The opportunities.
People keep coming up and we show them what we do, and they're like, first off, they say, we have no idea. We have no idea.
That's the standard response.
Yeah, we had no idea. And the second one is, wow, you're doing a lot. And we forget just how far ahead of everybody we are. Because for us, it's day to day and we see all the warts. But for other folks who haven't come close to doing what we've done, it's an eye-opening experience to come.
It was eye-opening for me because now that I've been on board for just about a year, Cathy's been having me go to some of these conferences with her, and these presentations from some of these big companies or big organizations, they get up and brag about, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that, and I just always look at her and go, didn't Andy do that? And it's true. Our biggest hurdle has been when we are in Alaska,
Right,
and getting that recognition, and getting our name out there.
And we've been, as I say, and we've been so busy that until Jimmy really started tooting the horn, we didn't have time to toot the horn. I mean, you're done with the project, you report, you're gone. I mean, you're already on the next one. And so it's a case of, we have some of the companies that are working with us, like Iris Automation, they do a collision avoidance. They're like, you want to work with Alaska. They're lousy tooting their horn, but they're the best in the business. Go work with Alaska. And that's how we have actually gotten a lot of our business, is people have worked with those test sites. They have had bad experiences. They talk to the community, and the community says, go work with Alaska. And so we don't have the full court press, where at Exponential, in every single bathroom stall in the women's restroom, there was the North Dakota test site propaganda. Never. We're never doing that. But it was a full court press.
More operational, and Cathy mentioned this earlier, but most of the test sites are asking for companies to come to them, pay a fee and test your equipment.
right.
We're really there to test with you and to use that technology to test it further, and we'll go anywhere. We're not also just in Alaska. We will go anywhere in the United States to help that company.
Yeah, we've got permission to fly up to 1,200
And
feet in Class G across the country.
And we've done Iceland.
And Australia,
Australia.
and some other places.
Yeah.
So because there are things that you can do in other countries, you just can't do in the
Right.
US. And that's been the situation for a lot of the US industry, and that's why that IPP is so important, is really to get the permission to be able to do those testing here in the country. But yeah, most test sites, they just fly a box. They've got their range with their radars, usually military radars, because the FAA won't certify anybody else's radars other than FAA and military. And they just fly that box. And we've got a certificate of authorization or waiver up to 130,000 feet in Oregon. We'll do all sorts of weird missions. We're operational. We function. And we solve challenges. And
Drives our ops guys crazy, but they love it.
they'd be bored if we didn't tell them,
No.
as I keep telling myself.
Well, is it gonna take a low Earth orbit network or numerous of them in order to get FAA finally off the beyond line of sight thing?
It's going to take the beyond visual. It's going to take the detect and avoid technology. It's going to be what's really going to get them off.
It's gonna be 5-6 years anyway.
Could be sooner, honestly, could be sooner if the technology matures fast enough.
I was gonna say, if the rate is maturing, JD's probably right.
Yeah. But, you know, the FAA is still convinced that a man's eye is more reliable than anything else. And, you know, our manned pilots will sit there and go, what do you see out of a window when you're flying anyway?
Yeah, you're kind of missing the entire bottom of the plane.
Right, you're
and
not
top.
seeing a lot. So, you know, and you're doing this and you're doing that. And, you know,
And they're reading their iPads and they're
Right.
doing these other
So
things.
it's,
And they don't check the NOTAMs and,
yeah, like we've had people come up and talk to us.
Yeah.
Well, you know, everybody has the friend here that hunts that goes, I'm not turning my ADSB on. I don't want anybody to know where I'm going.
yeah.
That's my hunting camp.
Yeah,
you know?
the discussion between equipped and operating, Alaskans know the rules. It says it will be equipped with. It does not say it will be operating. And they pointed that out. And, you know, everyone's like, well, you know, nobody flies under 400 feet because, you know, you're supposed to be under 500 feet. We're like, oh, yeah, right. You haven't been around Alaska, have you?
A lot of the crashes happen.
Exactly. And, you know, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, you're not supposed to fly within 500 feet of it. Yeah, everybody puts it on the right to get home, you know?
Yeah.
But these are the same people who fly through Poker Flat when they've got missiles launched at them, you know? It's like, you have to watch the radar because they're using Poker as a flight into Fairbanks. So it's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge, and the opportunities for the state are incredible. And we just need to make sure that we break it so that we can really move the state forward.
So are we gonna be able to see the PowerPoint after this session?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
And
There's all these abbreviations that, you know,
So how important is weather data to you guys?
very important, especially if you happen to be like out over the Arctic Ocean. So the SOTA campaign, we're right now getting data from the ACUASI, so that we have an actual real world measurement out over the ocean to know what the conditions are. Because you want to avoid icing. You also want to make sure that if you're trying to get an image of the ground, that you're below the clouds. If you're above the clouds, all you can get a beautiful image of the clouds. So you really need to know what the transition is, where the temperature is, what your relative humidity is, what's the icing potential. So we just got a weather ops that the relative humidity was 108%, and it was freezing temperatures. So that's icing. I mean, that is super saturated icing. The moment that touches a wing, you've got ice. So we need to know that information to determine what's happening. We love flying in Fairbanks because the relative humidity is 100%, but the absolute humidity is 0. So icing is not a problem here in the middle of winter. But if we're flying these maritime missions for domain awareness and other things, it's a key issue, and weather is vitally important.
It really helps that National Weather Service is right next to us. It really does.
This is leading up to, have you had any conversations with the US Array guys?
Really haven't in terms of the med stations on the US Array, but a lot of where we're flying right now is off coasts or it's in a fairly limited area. And so that high resolution weather data isn't required at this particular moment. As we go further and we go more beyond visual line of sight and we get away from infrastructure, it's going to become key. But yeah, so I should probably talk to them about those med stations.
Because we're at a critical time of deciding how many of those stations are going to stay in operation. Senator McCaskey's office is working with us on that issue.
Okay. Yeah, we'll follow up then with Nathan.
It's a line item in the budget, the UA budget now, but where it goes in the future is still up in the air.
Okay. We can terrorize the Murkowski staff.
Oh, Nathan loves it.
So,
Well, this
so thank you guys.
Yes.
And if you end up near the university,
Come up and see us.
yeah, come up and see us. We can do a tour. You can get your.
We're in
We're in
Oxo.
Oxo.
Yeah, third floor, Oxo. Yeah.
I remember you were
Yeah,
in the shed.
we were down in
Haggard.
industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not a good place to be because apparently across town is the Grand Canyon for researchers. So being on the university, we're much closer and far more integrated. But it does lead to ITAR challenges because there are foreign nationals on campus and in our building. So
we have fun signs everywhere.
we have fun signs everywhere, and we have keys that only the fire department has a key. Facility services has a call down list because they're not getting in our rooms, and facility services has not responded well to that.
It was very interesting.
Well, it's been a long-running dream, around the state and around this table for sure. Diversifying our economy, getting on the cutting edge of something that wasn't just resource extraction, and you all are actually pulling it off. So I just want to say congratulations. You're doing a great
Thank you.
job.
Or just a vision?
It should be open. It works
I
like,
gotta-
I've used
I
it
gotta go
before,
home.
well,
Okay, okay.
My kid's been
you can't
hitting.
really see all the folks.
Right,
You can
yeah,
hear well enough.
Yeah.
Hold on, Jimmy.
That's why she called and I've been texting.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was-
So I apologize about that.
Oh, I was